And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Tom Vasel.
Antics from the Fragor brothers. They always make games about animals. Hey, ants, fantastic. I usually like their games, even their games that aren't. Some of their games are fantastic. Other games I'm like, meh. This one is half and half woo. There's an ant pile building mechanic in this game, which is really neat. I haven't seen it in a game before, and I really liked it, and I was so fascinated by that aspect of the game. The rest of the game, where I was moving ants around and collecting goods and bringing them back, and using soldier ants, it sounds all more fascinating than it was, and the board was a little confusing to see. So I'm kind of on that part of the game, but I love the ant building, so I half love this game and half this game. So all together, well, let's take a closer look and see. Now, I'm not going to explain all the rules in this game. I'm just going to talk about some of the aspects. But basically, you're going to be sending ants out to get different foods. You'll be placing these foods on different spots that are marked on the board at the beginning of the game. Like, for example, here's a moth, and you'll find a place where the moths are. And players will be collecting these moths and leaves as the game progresses, and you'll be bringing them back to the anthill. To do that, you'll need to place ants that are located between here. And I guess I want to point out these ants. They're little wooden ants, and they're good. It's just really hard to tell that they're ants. I mean, they look to me almost like a little car here. I almost would have preferred little, maybe rubbery ants or something like that. But be that as it may, this is really not as much about an ant game as it is about a worker placement game. See, players are going to get pawns of their color, and each player is going to start with an anthill. Now, forget this board for a second. Let's come over here and focus on the anthill, because this is by far the most interesting part of the game. So at the beginning of the game, you start with this anthill here, and you have these pawns, and on your turn, you're going to place a pawn on top of one of these and take an action, and you can place it on any one of these spots. Now, as the game progresses, you will be adding more to this anthill. You'll be making it wider, and then you can also make it higher. And the reason you want to make it higher is because when you take an action that is on a higher spot, you will get more of that action. For example, one of the actions that you have is a scout action. That's this action right here. It gives you more tiles. And so I can take one tile with it normally, but if I manage to get that scout action up on the 3rd level and take it there, then I will get to take 3 tiles. So as the game progresses, you're going to be taking more and more of these tiles and trying and figure out how high you want to make the anthill so that you can get more actions, but at the same time, every time you make the anthill higher, you're covering up actions, and you have to be careful that you have a place to put your action. Here there might only be one ladybug action, while there's 3 of these actions here. Now, the different actions let you take tiles, and at the top of the board you can see I have it set up there. There's a place to take tiles, and as these tiles are taken each turn, these anteaters move over, and these anteaters come and eat your ants. It's not nearly as scary as you might think. The anteaters are slightly annoying at best. But other than that, you'll take these tiles with one of the actions. Another action is hill here, allows you to build the tiles onto your anthill, and then you can hatch ants, and there's different types of ants, but basically a different type of ant just basically means that it's going to go on a certain terrain type. So here I have a water ant or whatever, and it goes on that water spot. And then you can send these ants out because they're planted in these hatchling areas here that are at the bottom of the board when you first get them, and then you can send the ants out. And then finally there's a way to take the different pieces of food and move them on your trails of ants back here to the ant hill. And you can do that. You can move these pieces as they come off the board, and then you can store some of them in your ant hill. Some of these spots here are for storage. And again, it's the way this game works is every time I come to the ant hill, I get excited because that's a really interesting part of the game. Every time I go to the board, I'm not nearly as exciting. And I love garish, gaudy stuff, but this board is kind of difficult to see what's going on. And it looks really exciting. You're like, oh wow, look, there's a spider over here. Do you know what that spider means? Absolutely nothing. You know, it looks cooler than the board actually is. The board itself, this part here, is essentially a pickup and delivery game, while over here it's a worker placement game. And yes, I know these are a dime a dozen, but the idea of building up your anthill to make certain spots better than other spots is just really, really neat and adds a lot to the game. So, that's the game. The game ends when a certain amount of food types are off the board, and then you score points for the different food types. Some of the leaves are worth more than others, and whoever has the most points is the winner. Like I said, I like ants. I love the theme, but I feel like I only really like half the game. I like the half that's the anthill. The half that's on the board is really, really mundane. It's a pick-up and delivery game, but you have to have lines of ants. And there are some soldier ants, I didn't mention those, where you can steal food from other people, but it's not nearly as exciting, and there's not as much interaction as you might think. Basically, you're sitting there concentrating on building your anthill. If I was a developer, I would have said, chuck the board, chuck everything else. Let's just make this building the anthill the whole feature of the game and do different things with that. I think there's a gem of a really great game. As it is, when you combine it with everything else, the game is kind of ho-hum for me. Like I said, I think the ant thing's really neat, but the theme isn't really brought out by the mechanics as much as I want it to be, and in the end, it's just a little bit boring.
Thanks for joining us today. For more written, audio, and video reviews, as well as the #1 board game podcast, check out the website at www.thedicetower.com. Until then, this is Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower.